To Refine Co. Today I'm going to walk you through what's included in the Refine 1 collection, how simple it is to use the presets, and how to adjust your white balance and exposure to get an elevated, timeless edit. I have selected a variety of images from stock, newborn, senior portrait to family and landscape, all with a variety of camera bodies and white balances and exposure settings. Let's go ahead and get started. As you can see here, I have a good variety of white balance, different camera bodies, different lighting situations. We have backlit, we have in the shade, full shade, after sunset, a little bit of sun speckle, a good variety here. And let's go ahead and just take a look at the collection. I'm going to have to click on develop. And over here to the left, you can see this is the Refine 1 presets. It includes one main preset and 4 strengths. So it's the same color tone for all 4 of these. It just gives you 4 different varying levels of black points, contrast, and shadow depth. And this comes from, the light and airy to lifted shadow all the way to a dark and moody. We have users that use all of these. Sometimes you'll find yourself using a couple frequently, and it just depends on the look that you're going for. But we try to make it as one click as possible, so we added 4 versions. 2 versions of black and white. And then we have 3 color tones, Chateau, Leather, and Pine. Those you will add on top of this if you wish. Refine 1 looks beautiful by itself, but if you're looking for a slight film tone, you can add the Chateau's got a very, very light pink. Leather is a nice warm, kind of a rust color, but again, very light. And then Pine has a slight soft green tone to it. And then we have some workflow tools. We have taking warmth out. So if you've got those images, sometimes spray tans or overly warm images, this just knocks a little bit of that skin warmth down. Works good on newborns too when you've got a baby that is leaning on the jaundice side or just tends to be a little warmer in general. And then of course, increased contrast, chromatic aberration, grains, 3 different grains you can use. Green bleach is a fan favorite. It's for when you have those neon saturated greens and you want to just tone them down a little bit. Refine 1 on its own tones down greens, but sometimes you find yourself needing to knock them back a little more, and we did a one-click tool for that. Green warm, if your greens are going a little too cool, these are based off of a Fuji film, and Fuji does lean a little cool on the greens, and if you are finding it too cool, you can add green warm, and that will add just a touch of warmth to your greens. And Highlight Recover, very popular and vibrant, is basically just a little bit of a color pop, and of course your workflow tools from there for undos. In your collection, you'll also get profiles. The profile collection does look a little different from the main collection in that it's only got 2 main profiles instead of 4 and 2, mainly because once you click on this, you get a slider, and that gives you the ability to increase and decrease your strength from there. So it just functioned a little differently, and it would have been redundant to do this in 4 stages, mainly because the slider gives you that option to increase and decrease. And this is just a workflow thing. So if you prefer profiles, this is a collection to use. If you prefer working with presets, this is the collection. Generally, don't use both. I'm just going to work with presets mainly so you can just see what's happening on this side, because with profiles, you don't get to see that as easily. So let's just go ahead and start from the beginning. We have these beautiful images from Rachel Bond. She is a lifestyle newborn photographer and has amazing work. Just going to go ahead and click on Refine 1 just so you guys can see right off the bat what it does. So that's a one-click edit. I haven't adjusted any white balance or anything. You can see it's as shot, and you can almost just walk away from there. It just depends on how processed you like your images and how much work you want to put into it. So as you can see, the strengths change as I click through. A nice one-click edit. Again, that's going to vary in actually the black and white. I should go click on through those too. Actually, let me go into this reset. And there, that way it doesn't have any tone on. Again, I haven't adjusted any white balances or anything. So without white balance adjustment, let's just put Refine 1 over here to the left, one click, so I can give you a look at the tones. Again, I have not adjusted anything on this yet. So there's a slight blush tone, and if you saw it by itself without this, it doesn't even feel too pink. It gives that nice soft blush tone that we see in film scan sometimes. And then Leather, just slightly warm, and then Pine gives a little bit more of that nearer to film scan look. I'm going to go ahead and reset and start from the beginning, and let's go ahead and edit this. in white balance wise. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that guy for a second. Take a look at this. I feel like it's a tiny bit green. I like to edit on white because a lot of times I'm dealing with white environments, and I feel like it's easier to see if the white is going too warm, too cool, if you're dealing with a white visual background. So you can see right here, we can really tell which way the whites are going. I'm going to go ahead and add a little magenta, and this is mainly because I believe these are Nikon files. Nikon and Sony files tend to lean a little bit yellow, a little bit green. So generally you're going to find yourself maybe adding a little bit of magenta, or you can use your chateau to balance that out. I'm going to add a little bit of warmth because I feel like this has kind of like that morning glow to it. A little bit of. And honestly, that's about all I would do to this image. It's so simple. And of course, it's a great image, so it's easy. So now that I have the white balance set, I can click through these. So say I wanted a little more pop to the baby, but now I feel like she's getting a little too much in the shadow. So I'm going to leave it on 3. But instead of pushing the exposure like this, because then we get really blown out and that's not an elevated edit, I'm going to lift from the shadows. You can see how her face is lightening up, but I still have that contrast in there. And I'm going to pull down the warmth just a touch on that. And the reason that works with our presets is mainly because of the tone curve we have built in. It helps lock in the highlights and lock in the black point. That way you can lift from the shadows, and it gives you a lot more flexibility without overexposing your images. A lot of people really feel they need to go this way, and it's just not a professional edit. Instead, you want to lift from here so the image is overall lighter, but you're not blowing out all these beautiful whites that we have in the light in the background. So let's go. That is that one. I'm going to go ahead and do this one in black and white as well. Same thing with black and white. So we don't want to do this because that just doesn't look very good. So what we're going to do is just lift from the shadows again. Tweak this a little as needed. And then you have the full flexibility to adjust in here if you feel like you need a little more or a little less. Let's go ahead and do another one. Excuse me. That is not backlit. So there's Refine 1. Again, no adjustments. And here, because it's not backlit, I have more room to lift without blowing out any of the whites. I'm going to adjust the temperature. Just a tiny bit of magenta. It doesn't take a lot. There you go. Let's go ahead and put this to the left so we can look at those tones. All right, so Refine 1 without a tone is over on the left. And there's Chateau. Beautiful. It's just subtle enough that it really gives a nice pink feel to it. Leather, nice and warm. Maybe not ideal for this situation, and pine looks really good on this as well. It gives it just that slight little film, kind of vintage film tone. All 3 are beautiful. All right, let's switch gears. And this one we have in full shade, lots of color. Let's go ahead and click Refine 1. And I'm going to push. I had a lot of room to push because I shot this slightly underexposed, and this is by me. It's for some of my stock photography. Warming up. Watching the skin tones is where I'm watching for the warmth, because I know what skin is supposed to look like. Sometimes you can't always remember exactly how yellow the yellow was, etc. So I'm going to warm up. And there's one click on that. I usually add a little grain. I cannot for stock, but for my personal work, I always add either grain 1 or grain 2. And you're not going to be able to see that on video. It's very subtle, but it's just enough to give a little bit of that film look. And then I'll click through the other versions, and you can see just how this is a nice soft look and how this gives you just a little extra pop and depth. A lot of our documentary style photographers lean on 3 and 4. And you can see, and then from there, if you wanted to kind of find that happy medium, you can adjust from there. So you can really make it completely your own or adjust as needed for the image. Some images need less, some images need more. I usually edit between 1 and 2 for my own work, but that's, like I said, it's just personal style, and we want to try to make it as flexible as possible for you guys. Pop this over to the left. And here's Chateau on this one. Again, you can see how Chateau, you really don't notice it as much unless you were looking for it. If I put this by itself, you wouldn't really notice. You see it a little here in the background where it was almost white. but overall it gives a nice look to the image. Leather, that looks beautiful, and pine looks really nice as well in this image. Actually, I'm going to go back to that image real quick. Clicked away to take a look at green bleach. Okay, so let me go back. We'll do 2. Since we have some decent greens on here, I'm going to pop this over to the left so you can see the difference. All right. And then I'm going to use green bleach real quick. It's so subtle. But you see, it just takes the neon out. You're not going to see it as much in this area as you do in these areas. This area where it gets kind of bright and a little bit neon, it just softens it just enough. And actually in this leaf, you can see it a good bit. I wish I could put them right next to each other, but I can't. But it just takes that kind of neon green out of there, and it's really helpful when you're dealing with those bright midday sun green patches. And then if I wanted to do green warm, you can see it warms it up. So it takes a little bit of that coolness out and gives us some extra warmth in the greens. So it's a great tool just to have those extra one-click options. There we go. And here's a beautiful portrait. This is slightly overexposed. We would prefer or suggest an exposure somewhere in here, mainly just so you don't blow out these areas where I'm running the preset. It just makes your editing a little better and helps maintain these highlights. You can see how it was a little hot in this area. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and put this one over to the left. I'm going to run Refined 1. And then I have the flexibility to lift from there. So that's one click of Refined 1. Look how it immediately softens up her skin, takes out a lot of that extra contrast that tends to make you, makes your skin not look as great. So the beauty of film, obviously we're shooting digital, so it's super, super clear. We can see a little bit of everything in her skin. But the beauty of film is that it does soften up your skin. It brings up those mid-levels and gives you a nice buttery, glowy skin. And that's something that we really worked hard to mimic in these presets. And you can see just how much we have this beautiful glow. Didn't even see it in the original file, but we brought that glow into the preset. And then from there, you can adjust your white balance as needed. You can adjust your shadows. Say you want a little more of that contrast of that fall off shadow. You can easily adjust that right there. And then from there, of course, you can run the tones. When you're dealing with white environments like this, you're going to see the tones a little more. I really like pine on this one. And then, of course, your strengths. And they all look beautiful. They just have a different vibe to them. So it really gives you the flexibility of working with what you have. And also, sometimes when you're shooting, you have a flatter image. Sometimes you have a very high contrast image. This gives you the ease of adjusting to those images. So if you have a flatter image, say a backlit image, sometimes you're going to need 3 or 4 to cut through like backlit haze or to cut through the flatness of a backlit image. And then sometimes when you have high contrast, 1 will be nice because it pulls a lot of that out. And let's go ahead and reset her real quick and look at the black and white. Oh, it's beautiful. Again, ideally it would have been somewhere in here in exposure. And then from there, that gives me the flexibility to adjust as needed. Soften the contrast, lift the shadows, pull back the black point, add in contrast. You can really kind of work with it and make it your own. And then you can add grain to that to give it that nice 35mm grain look. Look at that. This looks beautiful. Gorgeous. Next up, I'm going to try to get through all these. Here's a nice bright image. Again, this is another one of my stock images. I sell stock photography, and there's a one-click edit, and that's pretty amazing. I really wouldn't have to do much else to this, and I usually don't. That's about where I would edit. I shot, this is a, what is this? I'm trying to remember which ones I was using on this. But it has a lot of, yeah, it's not going to tell me even on here, I don't think. Nope. This is the Voight. So it's a manual focus lens, and it has a lot of vignetting. So that's something that I usually have to manually correct or end up cropping out, just so it's just because I'm shooting on a mirrorless camera. So this is about how I would edit this. And if I wanted to add vibrant for a little bit of that pop, and you can see it's subtle. We keep everything really light. Nothing's going to be obtrusive, but it just adds that little extra pop of color when you need it. And say I need a highlight recover, that would be this one. Say these got a little hot over here, these whites. If I hit highlight recover, it just knocks them back. Again, subtle. It's not something you're going to notice. It's not going to be super strong, but just enough that it softens them, but it still allows that sunlight to peek through there. All right, newborn. This is beautiful newborn from Danielle Hobbs. She is a phenomenal newborn photographer out of the DC, Maryland area. And same thing, I would suggest an exposure somewhere in here just to keep these white points a little softer. And Refine 1 is a collection that is ideal for newborns. All of our collections obviously work on them, but if you're looking for that clean studio look, Refine 1 has been a go-to for many of our newborn photographers. Just because it is soft and subtle, it's not a very strong preset, it doesn't have a lot of color shifts, so it works well in this environment. And you can see it didn't need tweaks, but I'm just giving it subtle little tweaks of contrast and shadow, just so we still have that beautiful fall off she got here, but still soft for a baby. I usually like to pull contrast off of babies because I feel like they're soft, they should stay soft. And then of course you can go into Photoshop and clean up any dry skin and things like that from there. And there's your before and after. And if I put this little guy over here to the left, take a look at those tones as well. You can see there's Chateau, Leather, and Pine. And Pine looks really nice. So it really does have that kind of film look with Pine. It's still warm. It's called Pine, so it has green, but it's really just a green undertone in the shadows, so it doesn't make the baby green. This would be a good one for, let me undo preset, and run black and white. Again, need to tone it down just a little in exposure, and we'll look at the dark version. That looks nice as well. And if you put the third grain on that, that's the strongest grain. That really gives you that 35mm black and white look. Here's a nice image that this is a senior portrait, a session that I did, and you can see we have setting sun over here to the left, still a little strong, so it's kind of high contrast light, backlit as well, so you can see she's in full shade here on the front side of her, but we have the nice warm in the background. Varying greens, we have warm, cool greens here in the shadows, and then we have those nice hot greens in the background. So let's see how Refine 1 works on that. So one click, Refine 1 on this, and I do have room to lift exposure, so I'm going to lift exposure a little, and then the rest I'm going to lift from the shadows, just to soften her up. And you can see just the translation of the greens is something that we're known for, and something that we spend a lot of time on when we create our presets, is we want a beautiful soft green, but we want it to still look authentic. We don't want you looking at the image and thinking that it's fake green. So that's something that we pay a lot of attention to. So this is a Fujifilm green here, so you can see it's definitely a little more on the blue cool side. And that's a perfect situation where if you wanted to warm those up just a touch, I'm going to undo that. Actually, let me go ahead and put this to the left so you can take a look at that. And so this is a perfect example to show you. So this is the exact same right now. This is straight up Refined 1, the first version. And I haven't done any white balance adjustments, and I'm going to warm the grain. And you can see it just really warmed up these areas in here, but still had that beautiful cool undertone. But if you wanted it just a little warmer, that's a great tool for you to have there. And then I don't know if green bleach will really translate on video on this one. Probably not. It did soften it a little, so it really desaturated the greens just a smidge. I'll undo it, see if you can see that. It's hard to see, but it definitely did pull a little bit of that saturation out, but I don't think it's really the perfect video for, or image for that example. So let me just go ahead and reset this and start from scratch, kind of tangent a little bit on the greens. Again, I lift from exposure, just a slight bit. I don't want to blow out this area here because this is where it was starting to get a little hot in the image originally. And I'm also watching these hair lights because we don't want those very hot. And then I'm going to lift from the shadows a little. Actually, let's take a look at 2. Yeah. I'm going to lift from the shadows. I think I like 2 because it gives a little more depth to this image. And really that's all I would have to do. I could turn this image over and it's beautiful. There's really not much you could do. But for personal preference, you can warm it up if you like a little more warmth. But you can see due to the reflection in the grass, we have a lot of warmth coming in. The reflection coming up from the grass and from her dress and from her hair, we have this extra warmth in here. So in my personal opinion, I rather have that part a little cool because she is in the shadow. That is how the scene looked. And then I could add a little magenta if I wanted to. Magenta is always nice to help balance out any green tones that you have as well. So if you've got color cast that's green coming in, the opposite of green is pink or red. And so you want to add pink when you've got too much green color, and you want to add green when you have too much pink. So if your image leans magenta, you'll add a little of the green tint in. That's a good white balance tool for you. So that's that image. Let's go ahead and click to another one. So completely different color palette. We're in the woods, so this is full shade. I think the sun had just set. Actually, we're just chasing the light after this moment. The next scene, we were literally running through a field trying to chase the sunspots. But so this is a cool one. I'm going to go ahead and run the preset first. Increase exposure to where I want it. And then from here, I'll adjust my white balance. And because of the nice warm fall tones, I am going to warm it up a little. Add a little magenta. And then from there, we can adjust strength if we want. This is about where I like to turn my images in. I like a nice simple edit. This is beautiful as well, though. That has a great amount of pop and contrast. You can see what it did for her skin. I mean, it just really softens up the pores. It helps soften up any acne, makes it easier to edit, gives a nice glow to her skin. The warmth in the background is not insane. It's not hurting your eyes. These did not go super saturated, but you still get that beautiful fall color. And same thing for here. And let's take a look at the tones. And here's where you can see where Chateau doesn't look very pink at all. It really just adds a nice look to the image. Leather, of course, looks good. And if I wanted to back off on the white balance a little, I could do that, and that would give leather a whole nother look, which is nice. And then, of course, pine. That looks beautiful. It's probably one of my favorite of the tones. And then I could undo tone and click through. And if you like it a little more moody, again, like I said, we have a few photographers that lean this way, and their work is stunning. And you can do that as well. So it really does give you full flexibility of editing. Okay, here we have, there's just that last little bit of sun we got cresting the trees over here on the left. You can see it kissing her hair, but the rest of the image is full shade. And you can see we're definitely going to need white balance. So white balance is going to be your #1 preset killer. So if you don't have good white balance, your preset is not going to look good. Some people will click on this and click on the preset and ask us why it's not working. It looks dull, it looks flat, because the white balance wasn't right. So our cameras only see what they see. When you don't have any warmth in the image, it's not going to think it's warm. So it's going to shoot it cool because that's what it actually sees. So we have to give it the warmth that we wanted it to have by adjusting our white balance. And like I said, when you have cool, you add warmth. When you have too much warmth, you add cool. And same thing with pinks and greens. It's the opposite. So all I'm doing is adjust the initial exposure, ran the preset, adjusted the white balance, and then tweak from there as needed. And let's just go ahead and make this big for you. You can see how beautiful and soft her skin looks. It doesn't have any skin softening in it, so if you want to add that, if you do that for your seniors, you can. Let's do this one here. I'm just going to lift a little from the shadows, and you can see how it still kept the depth of 2, but lightened up the areas in the shadow side that I wanted to lighten up. I feel like it's leaning a little magenta, so I'm taking a touch of that out. There you go. Beautiful image. And let's go ahead and reset and take a look at this one in black and white. So same thing, lift. And then since she's in the shadow side, I'm lifting from the shadows. and then I can adjust from there. And that's a gorgeous black and white. Let's go ahead and straighten this one out. Refine one. Go ahead and warm it up. Lift. Decide what strength. Perfect. 2 works great. And this is a perfect example of one that was just a little flatter. I just felt like overall this moment looked too flat and I wanted her to stand off from the wall a little. So that's why 1 didn't work. So I needed it to be a little more depth. And that's just because of the light we were shooting in. It was after sunset. So the overall light was very flat at that point because there was no directional light at all. So any of these actually look really good on this image. But you can see just how it cuts through just enough. Still makes it look natural, but gives us the extra little bit of punch we needed to break her away from the wall. And again, I can sit there and adjust from there depending on the overall mood that I'm looking for the image. All right, I'm going to skip this one because I think it's very similar to these two, and let's move to something else. I think this is either Sony or Nikon. Let's take a look. This is Sony, and like I mentioned before, Sony white balance tends to go a little yellow-green. You can see just how much yellow-green this went on this image. This is by Rachel Bond. She's also very similar to Danielle Hobbs, a newborn studio lifestyle. She does beautiful outdoor family work as well. This is her all-white studio and beautiful family. And I'm going to show you guys, on this one, I'm going to show you a little trick. Instead of manually adjusting the white balance, which we will end up tweaking, I want to show you in Lightroom. You have right here where it says as shot. If you click on this, it gives you basically the same settings you have in your camera. It probably shot on auto white balance, so that's what this camera said was the auto. And but we're going to click auto on Lightroom. And Lightroom read the image and then decided to adjust it. And you can see just how much it changed the white balance on its own just by using auto here. So if you struggle with white balance, this is a good trick to get you on the right starting path, and then you can adjust from there. So like for me, I feel like it made it a little too magenta. So I know I'm probably going to pull some magenta out of this image. So maybe somewhere in here. But at least got me on a good starting path and helped neutralize this color that we have on the from the Sony file. And then from there, I'm going to click Refine One. And this was slightly overexposed, so we're going to tone it down and adjust white balance as needed. There we go. And so here's our starting image. Let's get a little cropped just so it'll get in a little closer for you guys. There we go. And then from there we can choose, actually I think 2 is going to be great for this, but I feel like 2 needs to be toned down a little. So I'm just going to pull back the contrast just a little bit on 2. It helped really put more depth back into their skin. So we did not want to wash out the skin. And then you can also do that in the shadows. So I'm trying to make sure they're not blown out because they're in the heavy part of the light since they're closest to the floor. But Mom got a little shadowed on here. And of course you could do a mask and just handle Mom, but I think if we just find a nice happy medium between the two, it can be a beautiful edit. And if we wanted to pull the blacks and their hairs down a little, we can just do that with the black point. And there's a lovely edit. And let's do this one. Same thing. Let's go ahead and just use our little trick over here. Use auto. You can see how that adjusted. I know that this is overexposed, so I'm going to pull it down. And I know he got dark, but I'm saving these whites, and then I'm going to lift from the shadows after I run the preset. And I'm going to go ahead and add a little magenta in there. Refine one. And we have to cool down some more. Lift from the shadows. Just slightly tweaking as needed until I find the right recipe. And then once you get, if you're shooting in the exact same spot, once you get that, you can of course Command-C, copy, and then paste your settings to your next images and save yourself a ton of time. Here's a perfect example where highlight recover might come into play. And you see that just very subtly pulled back those highlights. That way they weren't completely blown out. Let's try Vibrant. Vibrant adds just enough little pop to his skin. You can see it just livens it up a little and makes him a little warmer. Let's do another newborn. This was again by Danielle Hobbs, a little bit more of a mid-tone skin. One click, honestly, one click, that's all I really have to do on that one. Highlight, recover, pull back those highlights. Actually, I think I'm going to keep those. I liked them on this one. Lift. You can adjust if you want to cool him down just a tiny bit. And then let's look at the other versions. And again, they're all beautiful. I actually really like 2 on this one. Let's lift a little from here. Just richens up the baby's skin a little. Again, I like softening babies because I feel like they should be. And you can pull back these highlights just a tiny bit. But I really liked how soft this fell off here. Let's look at this one in black and white. Nearly a one-click edit. Again, you could soften if you wanted to. Stronger version, a little more of a darker 35mm film grain. Maybe soften those blacks just a touch. There you go. And sorry about that. And then one more, let's just do this landscape. We got some candy color skies happening. This is down in the Gulf of Mexico. And click 2. Increased exposure. You can see when you pull your exposure down to allow all of this to show, you can see just how far I can push this file before things get overexposed. So that's another reason to keep your exposure down a little versus up, because it gives you just a little more freedom with the file. Let's go ahead and warm it up a bit. I'm going to add in some magenta to really play with these cloud colors. And show you the before and after. There you go. Here's the before and after. I hope that gives you a good look at the Refine 1 preset collection, how to use them, how to adjust your white balance and exposure to get an optimal edit, and just how easy it is to create a wide variety of looks with the Refine 1 collection. I'll have links below to the collection, and you can always message me if you have any questions.